Right now, you were looking at an animation that was captured by the Voyager 1 space probe in 1979, and if you look closely, you can clearly see the details of Jupiter, and the Great Red Spot is just huge, and you can also see one of the moons passing by. So, we all know that Jupiter takes about 9 hours and 55 minutes to complete one rotation. So what would happen if I spend one night looking at Jupiter constantly for a few hours? Well, I would see Jupiter rotating. So, and that's what I did last night. So I was out imaging Jupiter, and alright, so the first step is to load your file, and I'm going to select my file from my desktop and one of my recent captures of Jupiter. So I've processed all of these files. With this last one right here, I just want to show you how it's done. So the moment you open this file, you're gonna get an option that says add the bear pattern. So the bear pattern is in RGB. So I'm gonna click on yes, and that's just colorizing the video from the black and white raw to this color. So the next thing I'm gonna do is go to processing options, and because the video looks a bit underexposed, I'm gonna stretch up the histogram tool, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, maybe it's a bit too bright. How about if we reduce it down to say 50%, and that looks perfect. So the next thing I'm gonna do is hit image stabilization. So because my tracking was not very good while I was capturing this, I need to stabilize this video such that Jupiter stays at the center of the frame in the entire video. So I'm going to hit on frame stabilization mode and hit on object planetary, enable object detection, and center the object in each frame. I'm also going to shrink down the resolution to 448 pixels because it gives you a nice cropped in view. So when you animate your Jupiter file, it's going to show you the planet itself. You don't need this black background you see right here. Anyway, now I'm going to hit on do processing, and the software is going to process your video file. So it's processing about 1700 frames. So now I can go to Autostackkert 2 and stack the file. So here it is, and I'm gonna open Autostackkert now. Okay, there it is, and I'm gonna load up my file by dragging and dropping. Just gonna close this up. Alright, so all the settings you see right here are in default. So there's not much to be done here except make sure you have the image stabilization set to planet and the noise robust. I don't really play around with this. I would say just leave it to its default setting. For me it's set to 7, although I don't really need it. I'm just gonna set it to a default setting, so 6. And the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make the software analyze this whole video. So I'm gonna click on analyze. So the software is going to go to the frames in the movie, and it's gonna give you a graph that shows you the best frames and the worst frames. So the peaks here are the best frames, and down to the curve you can see the worst ones. So the key here is to stack the best frames if you want to get a sharp photo, but the problem is if you only stack a few frames, you're gonna end up with a grainy looking image. So I'm gonna stack most of these, and that will remove most of the graininess. So 1000 frames is what I'm selecting for now. And the next thing I'm going to do is make sure I have RGB align. RGB align tool helps you to get rid of the atmospheric dispersion, which is, you can see here, it's prominent. It could also be due to the optics of your telescope. But anyway, the next thing I'm going to do is add the alignment points. Okay, so as you can see, the alignment point size is set to 72. I guess we should drop it down to 56. Now, in theory, the more alignment points you have, the sharper your image would be. So add as many as you can. I would say 48 seems to work well for me. If you can go below that, 58. I don't want too small of them. I think 48 is pretty good. So now I'm gonna hit on stack. So the file is ready to be processed and sharpened in Registax. Alright, so this is what our stacked image looks like, and I've got it loaded up in Registax for wavelet sharpening. So I'm not gonna play around with any of these settings. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull up these sliders, and the moment you do that, you're gonna start to see a sharpened image. So I'm just gonna add a zoomed in preview for showing what it's actually doing, and I'm gonna increase the sharpen, and as I do that, you also get a lot of noise here. So in order to get rid of the noise, use the denoise button to improve your image, and I think that's really cool. So I'm gonna add a few more sliders and see how it looks. So how many sliders and you should use, that really depends on how good your image is. Just keep using these sliders until you get a satisfactory result. So that looks pretty good. The center kind of looks overexposed, so in order to correct that, I'm going to use de-ringing to remove the artifacts, and that seems to be working pretty fine. Alright, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna save this file, and now we're done processing this. Alright, so now that we're completed stacking all the files, it's time to compile the animation. So I'm gonna load up my files in a sequential. So here it is. So this is the first my first file right here, and here is the stacked image of Jupiter, if you like. In the same way, I'm gonna add all these files and make sure that they are in the right sequential. And there it is. So we've got them all loaded up. So there are about 8 images. The first thing I'm going to do is click on optimize options for a planetary AVI. So I'm gonna go for an AVI instead of a GIF. So the first thing I'm gonna do is go to processing options, and all these settings you see are by default. So one thing I want to do is equalize the RGB channels, because one problem I encountered when I processed these is that all of them had a different color cast in it. So in order to correct the colors, I'm going to use RGB channels and equalize them for all the files. So that's a very useful tool. And the next thing I'm going to do is head to animation options and play all frames in forward order. I'm not really sure about this one, but play all frames in forward order. And one more thing I like to do is, make the animation go backwards, because why not? That's gonna look even cooler. So it's gonna go forward and backward like a few times. That's what I'm hoping for. So coming to the sequence of all the frames, I'm gonna repeat the sequence up to 6 frames, and finally going to output options. The output format is going to be in AVI, and the AVI compression I'm going to keep it in RAW. And one thing I want to do here is change the frame rate, so I'm going to keep it to 3.5 frames per second. That seems to work pretty well. I've tried it before. So lastly, we're gonna hit on do processing, and boom, so our animation is ready. So full screen, if you